tell you right now that I'm going to run late because we're starting late, and you're going to have to hear that preacher after 12 o'clock. Either listen now or wait and listen to him late. He's going to come kick my shins if I take his time. And I'm already into it nearly 7 minutes. I don't mind. I'll stay and listen, but if you don't want to, you better listen to me early. You're going to get stuck with him then.
I love it.
It's another one of our lady heroes we're reading about today.
Deborah.
And I mean for real. I'm talking about a battle war hero. Deborah. No, not her. Another lady is the hero in the war. Deborah is who the prophet is. You know, when you read the Bible, you first thing you try to do when you're learning is how many books there are and what goes before what, and you memorize all that. And when you get to using them, you begin to see why some of them follow the others, like Joshua and Judges, and then Samuel, because they were chronologically right behind one another, but all of them aren't. But this is one of the ones that falls right in line, because before they had a king, they had judges and prophets that were not like Elijah and that kind, but they were prophets. And they were anointed by God. Deborah's one of those. She wasn't one of the male prophets. She was a female prophet. She was a judge. And this was early on. There was a 300-year period before they got any kings. And after Joshua, there was a 300-year period they just had judges. And it wasn't working out very well for them, because it seemed like every time God would start blessing them and give them peace, they'd start chasing idols again, and here comes invasion, and they'd have a war and lose their independence. And when it got bad enough, they'd turn back to God, and come along another invasion when they began to worship idols. And that went on for a long time. And they weren't well organized, really. And in this case today, where we start, the Canaanites are in charge up in the northern part of the promised land to be. And they're not too organized either. They make it look like they are in the Bible. But really, this guy that's the king, Sisera, he's not really a ruler of all those people. He's a ruler of one group and kind of the senior king among kings. But they weren't really kings. They were small places, you know. But he was the most powerful one. And so our book will tell us that this, and the Bible will tell us that he was the king of all that. But he was just the main king in there. And they didn't call him kings, they called him Jadon. So that's where we start out. Israel has veered away from God. And for 20 years, those Canaanites up there had really given them bad time. And when it got bad enough in the northern part, they started yelling to God. And then that's where we start. Our lesson in this little text we have says, difficult challenges are more manageable when we have the support of someone we trust. Sometimes this person has a certain kind of expertise, like marriage counselor or financial advisor, or they're a friend who provides accountability, or a spiritual mentor who encourages faith and offers directions. Something as simple as being present, just sitting quietly with someone who's struggling, can help them remember that God is with them and is fighting for them. That's very true. Some of us need a lot of support. Some of them don't think we do, and we get older and find out we do. Or when a bump comes along and we haven't experienced it before, we look around for somebody that has, or they come and tell me, I've been where you are, and this is how I got out of this. That's what they mean. We need to rely on one another. We need to be close to one another spiritually, because we don't know who needs help. Sometimes they don't show it. Most of us have had those experiences. Some of us have been on the side to help someone else, or later maybe we needed the help. Today we're considering Deborah, a prophet and judge in Israel. Her guidance and godly presence helped deliver the Israelites during a time of great oppression. Her story is found in the book of Judges, and it covers a very dark time in Israel's history. As the last verse of the book says, in those days Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. That's the last thing in Judges. That's really what they were doing. They didn't have a leader. They had turned their back on God. They didn't have a king. And before Samuel come along and anointed somebody, they had lost Joshua, and in between there, they had no guidance. There was nobody to go to. But they had the judges. This was Deborah. Our text says, as after Joshua, the generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. Instead of following God's command to drive out the inhabitants of Canaan, the Israelites allowed some to remain. These pagan people and their gods became snares. We don't realize sometimes when we're generationally changing. For instance, I and a few other old folks remember some days that many of you don't. And I've seen them slip away, but we didn't suddenly realize it. It's just one day we went in and looked in the store and saw the clothes people were wearing. We thought that would have been considered obscene and shameful when I was a kid. I don't know when it changed, it just did. And it's the same way in our worship, in our relationship with God. We don't think about the little things we don't do that we let slide, or the little things we pick up that are new that get in the way of our worship and our time for dedication to God. We don't realize them until one day we've lived a generation, we're about to die, and we see the world behind us has slipped away, slipped this huge distance. And it happened without our being aware, it seems like. And that's what had happened here. The parents quit telling the children. There was no one alive that could say, I saw the waters parting. I ate that manna. My shoes didn't wear out for 40 years. All those people are gone. What do they have to stabilize them here in this situation? Joshua's dead. He was a champion of the wars. They no longer had military strength. They began to spread out and lose their relationship because oppression came in certain parts of the country and took over some of the northern guys. And the South was still doing okay, but they weren't being led well. And they weren't worshiping God. And they really didn't realize it until it got bad. And that's the way it is sometimes with us. We don't turn to God until we get to such a point and so alienated, and we realize that it's like old Paul. Jesus said, is it difficult kicking against the bricks? They had those places where when they'd kick, it'd stick them, you know. And do we have to wait until we get to that point? Sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't realize we're that far away. And then one day we need God. We say, I haven't prayed in a week or a month. I haven't been to church in a year. And we don't realize we let little things come in. That's what happened to Israel. They didn't just suddenly one day start worshiping idols. And they didn't suddenly realize that God could help them out. It had to get bad. And it got very bad. And that's where this story comes in today. They had one judge, a guy named Ehud, who had been before Deborah, and he was a leader both spiritually and military. And he kicked the Moabites around quite a bit, ran them off. And they were at about 40 years, I think it was. No, it says 18 years. They were under oppression for 18 years. And then they had 80 years. That was a big stretch because many of them were just 10 or 20 years and then jump on them again. But he had pretty well eradicated the enemy. So they had 80 years, and then when he died, they had a problem. They forgot about God, started worshiping Baal and Asherah. We know about those guys. Baal's the one that had them passing the babies through the fire. Asherah was the one that worshipped sex and that kind of thing. God allowed them to be conquered by the Canaanites. And King Jabin of Hazor, he's the one that got them together to oppose them. And that's where we're going to go to the Bible. And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, and reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Sisera, which dwelt in, oh boy, here's a good one, Harosheth of the Gentiles. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at the time. We have a lot of historical fact outside the Bible on this particular era. From Josephus, and there's another writer or two that did a good history on this. Apparently this lady was pretty well known. She did a lot of things besides just be judge. But she wasn't the prophet that went around visiting and telling God's going to curse you and all this kind of thing. So we know quite a bit about her. And she was respected, well respected. And she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. There was actually a grove of palm trees. In that area, they weren't prominent. Weren't predominant. They stuck out like a sore thumb in that part of Palestine back then. And there was a grove of them, and there's still some in that area. But she sat under a tree in that area. It wasn't just one palm tree out there, and people came to her. And she sent for Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kedesh, Naphtali, and said unto him, hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, go a draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and of the children of Zebulun. He said, didn't God tell you to do that? This is what she's saying. They will say over here, God said that. We're going to read part of this in the modern version of the translation because it's pretty hard to understand otherwise. And I will draw unto thee the river Kishon, Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. She said, it's time to do something. God has said, go get 10,000 guys from these two tribes and go jump this fella that's got 900 chariots or whatever. This guy had already organized his people. And they had not had a winning war in a long time. And they said, God said, go up there and do this. She had to have the respect and the authority, with the people. They had to be believers to jump out and venture something like this.
Yes.
Barak said unto her, if thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with thee. Notwithstanding, the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor, for the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kedesh. Now this isn't really that he was afraid to go. They used to take the ark, remember? And it was common to have ladies somewhere around when you went to war, because somebody had to do the cooking and feed them and stuff if they went out. And they may not have been on the front. But what he needed was moral support. He needed spiritual advice and moral support. He didn't say, I'm afraid to go. He just said, if you'll go, I will. If you don't, I won't. She said, okay, but you're not going to get credit for it. She let him know. It's not jealousy here. It's just a fact that if you don't go, I'm not going to go. And she said, okay, I'll go, but you won't be the brave man hero of this thing. And that's all she said about it. She didn't rub it in and say, okay, weakling. She realized there was a need, but she's explaining, this is how it works. God's going to show somebody else. Remember, we're not the only ones in this fight. Some of us need a little support, but if we don't go do it, there'll be somebody out there to help you. If we don't need, there won't be. But if we need it, there will be. God works on both ends of these things. When He's got a job for you, He's got somebody to help you or someone there prepared to be the subject of your search. Step out in faith, but we have to be close to God to make these moves. These are radical things that we're talking about. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kedesh, and he went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber, the Kenite, here we go, this is a father-in-law Abraham's relative. I think they said he's his nephew. But he's not a good guy. The Kenites, in this case, they're siding with the bad guys, Canaan. And he had split away from the group he was with because he went down where the weather was nice. I read a little about that. He went down there to this area, and that's what brought him to this area. This is all going on southwest of the Sea of Galilee. If it's up here, then from your side, looking down over here, if you're looking up from the south, it'd be on your left-hand side. But south of there, and the actual point of where they went to war, where they went to battle, was about 15 miles. I looked that up. He was about 15 miles from where the people were there waiting to go down on them. You know, the good guys went up there together, and they sat there, and she could see from where she was where they were camped out down there in the valley. This was a mountainous region. And we'll see later it's a valley that comes together with a river. and it becomes a critical location. God picks everything just right. It's amazing when you start looking at little details of things like this. It said this, he was a Kenite and was one of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had severed himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent unto the plain of Zaanam. I looked that up and don't remember how to pronounce it. Zaanam, that's it, which is by Kedesh. And they showed Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, was gone up to Mount Tabor. As I said, they got up there where they could see down on them. It's quite a distance, but you could see that large number of people out on the plain, because there is a plains area right there. Even though it begins to narrow down, it was plenty big for the number of people. And they shewed Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, was gone up to the Mount Tabor. He told him. He gave him information. He was not on their side. He was on the side of Sisera. And Sisera gathered together all his chariots, even 900 chariots of iron, and all the people that were with him, from Harosheth of the Gentiles, into the river Kishon, unto the river. And Deborah said unto Barak, Up, for this is the day which the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from the Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. Now he made a quick trip here. Like I say, they were about 15 miles up. And the Lord discomfited Sisera, and all the chariots and all his host, and the edge of the sword before Barak with the edge of the sword. He came in and killed them all. So that Sisera lighted down off his chariot and fled away on foot, on his feet. But Barak pursued the chariots, and after the host unto Harosheth of the Gentiles, and the host of Sisera fell upon the edge of the sword, and there was not a man left. Now, one of our writers has something to say about this. Josephus. He detailed these things about military pretty clearly. He said there was what they call a tempest. It was a thunderstorm, we would call it, and a lot of wind and hard rain. And it was coming in the face of these guys, but it was coming from behind his people with Barak. And this storm had them all shook up and aggravated, and they come charging down right in the middle of it. God planned everything just right. And they started running. But they had a problem. On one side was not their friends. They couldn't go that direction, south. They could go west, but the river came close to the mountainous part, and they couldn't get through there with 900 chariots. It got narrower. So the king didn't run that way. He ran down to that one group that were friendly with him on foot. Meanwhile, all the others got tangled up in that mess, and the thunderstorm had produced a flood. This thing was not really a river until it rained. But if you've ever been to West Texas, you know you get washed away completely when it rains 40 miles up here and you don't hear it coming. It just comes. That's what happened to them. It's amazing when you start looking at the little details. Here we're just, so far, all it's told us was they died of the sword. All of them. That one guy didn't. He's the one we're going to talk about in a minute. Howbeit, Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin, that actually means king. That's what they call him. Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. This guy had some money, and his wife was noted for being flashy. She had beautiful clothes and stuff like that. She was well supported by this guy. He was the hefty of the group down there. And Jael went out to meet Sisera, because she's not like her husband. And she said unto him, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. For when he had turned in unto her tent, she covered him with the mantle. She laid him down and hid him. And he had been running, and he was tired and out of breath. And he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him drink and covered him. Now this was a leather bottle. I had a friend from Mexico, went on a trip down there in the mountains in a big valley, and they were drinking out of one of those. You squish it, you can turn it up and squish it, and it'll spurt like they do the bottle on TV. When you see them giving the athletes a drink, they do this, it squirts right out. But it wasn't water she gave him milk. Sour milk's what Josephus called it. We would have called it curdled milk. And they dilute it with water and they call it Laban. And it's a common drink still today. They drink it. And he drank a lot of it. She opened the bottle of milk and gave him drink and covered him. And then he said unto her, Stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be when the man doth come and inquire of thee, say, Is there any man here? Thou shalt say, No. Now she's doing this all for one reason, because she sides with the children of Israel. Then Jael, Eber's wife, took a nail of the tent, took a hammer in her hand, and went softly in unto him, and smote the nail into his temple, and fastened it to the ground. For he was fast asleep and weary, so he died. Those things are about that long. We think it's the same size they still use. And it would have either been wood or metal with a sharp point on it. They're about a foot long, maybe even 18 inches. They had to hold in that sand. And sometimes you had to hammer pretty deep to get, if you were in an area that was loose sand, or it wouldn't hold. If you've ever been camping, you know what happens. The wind and rain come in, and it just comes right up. So it was substantial. And she came in and drove it through his temple. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said unto him, Come, and I'll shew thee the man whom thou seekest. And when he came into her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, and the nail was in his temples. His temples, plural, all the way through and into the ground, it said.
Oh, nailed into the ground.
Yeah. Now, the reason this was so easy for her to do, she took him to the back of the tent. We talked about that last week. He knew no man would come in there and go in that area because it was for women. And it wouldn't have been right to violate that. So that's where she hid him. He thought he was safe.
That's where we get the saying, nailed it.
It's also where we get the saying, hell hath no fury to a woman's scorn. She was getting after this guy. And God subdued on that day Jabin, the king of Canaan, before the children of Israel. And the hand of the children of Israel prospered and prevailed against Jabin, the king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. It's amazing what God can do if we just turn to Him. And we need to remember when times get tough, it's the only place we have to go.
Yes.
Don't forget that. No matter how far you get astray, God will forgive you. God will take you back. And He still wants to help you. It's all about love. That's why it works.
Mm-hmm.
And He is a merciful God. David said He would always be. And He always was. He said there's no end to His mercy. when you get in a tight, when things go rough, turn to God. It's okay to get counseling from someone that's a professional, and it's fine, and it's common sense, but there will be no counseling like our counselor, the Holy Spirit. That's what Jesus said, I'll send you a counselor. I'll send you somebody to talk to. They didn't have that. Now this next chapter, we'll see how it starts here. Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day, saying, Praise ye the Lord for the avenging of Israel. When the people willingly offered themselves, once they turned to him. Hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes. I, even I, will sing unto the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. Now this man is singing with her, the general. Now, he was of a religious sort anyway. We know that. Now I'm going to go from there over to a translation of this because it's difficult to understand. When thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom. Let's see how that goes over here. And Deborah, then Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying that the leaders led in Israel, that the people volunteered, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give an ear, O rulers. I, the Lord, I will sing. To the Lord I will sing. I will sing the praise to God, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, and you marched from the field of Edom, the earth quaked, the heavens also dripped. You see, it did rain, it had a thunderstorm. It also dripped water. The mountain quaked in the presence of the Lord. Thunderstorm. The mountain was shaking. When you brought the mountain there on Seir, it run down the hill and flooded. When you marched from the field of Edom, the earth quaked. The mountains quaked in the presence of the Lord. This Sinai at the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shemar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted. The travelers went by roundabout ways. The pleasantry ceased. They ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose. He's saying there was nobody living in these villages. Well, there were some. There were people there, a few, but they would not go by the main routes. It wasn't safe. Anywhere they went. Where the water was the nearest water to where they stayed was a few miles away. And the robbers would come to that area. They knew they had to go water the sheep twice a day. And they would lay out there and wait on them. When they come in, they'd take everything they had and maybe kill them. So they went around through the byways and avoided them. They had to go to the water, but they were really losing everything they had. There weren't many people still down in that part of the country because of that. Until she said, until I arose. Sounds like she's bragging. Until I, Deborah, arose. Until I arose, a mother in Israel. New gods were chosen. The war was in the gates. Not a shield or a spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. Now that was not literally. There were more than one or two shields and spears, but there weren't enough fighting. They no longer had an organized army. They just kind of wandered around and did what they want. That's exactly what it says in the last chapter of this book. My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, the volunteers among the people. Bless the Lord. For you who ride on white donkeys, these were people that were high class. They painted their ears and their tail red. And they had these light colored donkeys, and some of them were dappled, and they painted their dots red. Look at me. I've got a special pony. Some of them had very large ones. So all mules are not small. And when I was a kid, they were big things, and they pulled plows.
Yeah.
Today, they pull a little buggy or let kids ride on. It's not the same. So these guys, this is who she's talking to. You who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets. They had what we call a saddle blanket up there that was soft and padded. And when they stopped, they'd sit on that. They never got dirty or anything. You who sit on rich carpets, you who travel on the road, sing at the sound of those who divide flocks among the watering places. There they shall recount the righteous deeds of the Lord, the righteous deeds for his peasantry in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down to the gates. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, sing a song. Arise, Barak, and take away your captives, O son of Abimelech. Then survivors came down to the nobles. The people of the Lord came down to me as warriors. From Ephraim to those not in Analak, came down. Some of them didn't go. Follow you, Benjamin, with your peoples. From Machir, I don't know this guy's name, Machir or Machir, commanders came down. And from Zebulun, those who wield the staff of office. They had rods to keep up with numbers on and kept bookkeepers. But they all came. Kept up with all the data. And from Zebulun, those who wield the staff of office. And the prince of Issachar were with Deborah. As was Issachar, so was Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his heels among the division of Reuben. There were great resolve in them of heart. Reuben, an unstable one. He had it in his heart to go. They decided to think about it. Why did you sit among the sheep fields to hear the piping of the flocks? Why did you go out and hide? Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. A little bit of sarcasm in there. Gilead remained across the Jordan. And why did Dan stay in the ships? Those two groups, they were mariners. They lived over by the Mediterranean. I guess it was. They didn't say the Sea of Galilee, so I don't know. And they sat at the seashore and remained by his landings. Zebulun was a people who despised their lives even to death. And Naphtali also, on the high places of the field, they went and fought, of course. The king came and fought. They fought the kings of Canaan. At Tananak, near the waters of Megiddo, they took no plunder in silver. The stars fought from heaven. Fought from heaven. I'm telling you, I'm losing my vision. The stars fought from heaven. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. Oh, my soul, march on with strength. It washed them away. As they died or before they died, it took them all. Because they had run down to that narrow part. And they're getting killed from behind with the swords. They were either dead or going to be, so it didn't matter whether they were alive or dead. The river took them. Then the horse's hoofs beat from the dashing of his valiant steeds. Cursed Miraz, or Miraz, I think it is, said the angel of the Lord, utterly curse its inhabitants, because they did not come to help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord against the warriors, because they didn't fight. Most blessed of women is Jael, the wife of Heber, the Kenite. Most blessed is she of the women in the tent, of all the women, everybody. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a magnificent bowl, she brought him curds. She reached out her hand for the tent peg, and her right hand the workman's hammer. Then she struck Sisera, she smashed his head, and she shattered and pierced his temple. Between her feet, he bowed, he fell, he lay. Between her feet, he bowed, he fell. When he bowed, there he fell dead. In one place it said she cut his head off. Out of the window she looked and lamented, the mother of Sisera. This is a lady that wrote this, apparently, because she sees the lady's viewpoint. Out of the window, she looked, lamented the Sisera, mother of Sisera, through the lattice. Why does his chariot delay in coming? Why do the hoofbeats of his chariot tarry? Her wise princes would answer her. Indeed, she repeat her words to herself. They had windows that were actually big openings, and they had what we'd call laths across them, and a lattice worked like that. And they could see out, but if they stood back from the window, you couldn't see in. And these were up in a high place, usually, on the front, so they could look out across the area around in front of their house, and you couldn't see them, and you couldn't get in the window. It wasn't down here where you could. And they could remove the whole thing like a door on the bottom ones if they had them down there. They could actually use it for a door. It went from top to bottom. So she's looking out the window looking for her husband, saying, what's keeping him so long? Why has he shown up? And the ladies that are there with her, her maidens or whatever they had, rich people had, and they're saying, well, you know, things, he may be out there counting the loot they got. And they find, and they not finding, are they not dividing the spoil? She said, the ones that you don't have here, the ones that are not here, aren't they out there counting the loot? A maiden, 2 maidens for every warrior. She said, that's why the men are late coming back. They took a bunch of women slaves. To Sisera, a spoil of dyed work. A spoil of dyed work, embroidery. Dyed work of double embroidery on the neck of the spoiler. They're talking about all the things her husband probably got. They're telling her, don't worry about it, he's out there busy. Thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord. But let those who love him be like the rising of the sun in the night. And the land was undisturbed for 40 years. David quoted some things from that, a couple of his songs, from that poem she wrote, that song. We get a good look inside how the families were, or certain things about families. And I looked at that last line that said, and they were peaceful there for 40 years. They had to have added that later. Now, our references I looked at said she prophesied that. But I tend to think they tacked that on there later for the writing in this book. I couldn't explain that if I tried to read it here from the King James Version. So I apologize for that. If you want to read it there, you'll find it follows pretty close. If you were a person who studied the Bible, you can find things about this era and about this particular event in Josephus, the Antiquities of the Jews. It's in the, and I recommend you get a copy. You could probably get a paperback in religious bookstores, because he has a lot of historical things to add, especially in the Old Testament times, that we don't understand some of the things because we don't know how they were living. And he was a very well educated guy. He was also a leader of a military group. He had led soldiers. And he wrote these things during the last days of the Jews. And he wrote details about what happened to the Jews when the Romans come in and killed so many of them and they destroyed Jerusalem. He wrote details about those things. So it's good references. He doesn't teach doctrine or anything like that. It's not a philosophy. He's a historian. And he was very thorough. So it will add to this. Now, I had a map, and I tried to print it. I was going to bring y'all all a copy, and I could not get my printer to obey me. And I got no green printing, and also I couldn't make it back away. I couldn't zoom out. And I know it's capable of doing that, but for today I couldn't get it done. I printed this before. I know I could have done it. But it would have shown you the Sea of Galilee right here. And this is where they actually got together right here. So it was just southwest of there. They had a battle line right up into here. This was a boundary. I considered that northern part all under the Canaanites. And they came up and went over there and back and forth here to show you the boundaries. Showed you where they came from. And they had big arrows showing it from the bottom, the route they took later on. And also it showed where Joshua had taken it all, and they had lost nearly all of it. That's all I have. That's what the book says, and it wasn't something that had a lasting effect, because they, right away, the very next verse in the next chapter says they fell away again. The thing that we can get mostly from this, God will use somebody that's prepared. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. He works on both ends. When he gives us a job to do, he will support it. He said, you'll be able to get anything you want from me if it's for the glory of God and it's something I've told you to do. And that includes people to help you. That includes preparing the situation before you ever get there. He already had these guys coming down and camping in the valley before he sent them up to the mountain. But they didn't know that. They had no idea. But the Lord told them to do that, to go get 10,000 men and go there. And on blind faith they went. And Deborah went up there and looked out and said, see, they're down there. Follow God's plan. It works best, and it's proven over and over and over in the Bible. And the older you get, you can say over and over in my life, He's proven to be faithful.
Yes.
I took my 10 minutes. I didn't plan it. It just worked out that way. Sorry. I don't know if they lose their break or you.
Well, there's no apology here.
That's it, brother.
Yes.